Welcome to Totally Talent Podcast by HR.com, your go-to source for all things talent. Whether you're looking for expert insights on high-volume hiring, the latest trends in recruitment technology, or strategies for building a winning team, we've got you covered. Join us for each episode as we dive deep into the challenges and opportunities shaping the talent landscape today. Let's get started.
Hey friends, welcome back to another edition of Totally Talent on HR.com. I am your host, Mike Wood, and today we're going to be talking about the incredibly exciting, wonderful world of reference checking with James Lord of RefApp. How are you, James?
I'm great, Mike. I feel like there's a little bit of an irony in your voice there. But
There is a little bit of irony because reference checking isn't the most exciting thing, at least to me, but maybe you can help change that. So I know that there's been a lot this year well, actually, first, let's just back up a little bit. Tell me a little bit about RefApp and what you do there.
yeah, absolutely. So, well, look, RefApp is a well-established business. It's been established for 8 or 9 years now in the Nordic market. So we're market leader over in Sweden, Finland, and Norway, where our CEO started the business basically off a need, right? It just recognized that reference checks can be misrepresented by the person who's giving the information, and there's not much trust or validity in the sources. And, ultimately the whole process of obtaining references is a really arduous and slow one that yields oftentimes very poor results. So that was kind of where the concept of the business started back in 2017 ish. 2017, 2018, back over there in the Nordics. They've had a ton of success with all of the major Nordic brands that we all know and love here in North America as clients, and they are looking to continue to have that same growth trajectory and solve a problem that so many people have here in North America. So I joined RefApp earlier this fall actually, and I've gotten going with them. But I've personally got a background in the reference checking space that stretches back over a decade.
So if I were to check your references, it would come back clean.
If you were to check my references, they would stack. Yeah, they would stack up. Absolutely.
Well, that kind of leads me to like the first question I have for you, which is just like, how can we ensure that candidates have the skills and the abilities that they say they do?
Yeah, great question. I mean, look, in the world that we live in today, I think with, ChatGPT or any other, pick your favorite AI generated resumes that can be spun up in minutes or sometimes even seconds. And the fact that, when we're doing digital interviews, you don't even know that this is actually me, right? How do we actually know that the other person on the other end of the phone or the other end, of the screen that we're looking at is who they say they are? So I think that third party validation, but also verification is just so critical. One of the things that I always love about talent acquisition in general and HR in general is it's kind of like, the way that I look at it is it's almost like kind of two different sides, right? We've got an art and there's a science. And the art part is us in HR and talent acquisition kind of having that internal gut instinct or a feeling about how we feel about whether this candidate is going to be a good culture add to our organization. But there's a science part that we're missing there. And that science part is just things like, third party verification, validation, IP address checking, device, browser, timestamps, audit trails, all of that good stuff. Even, the way that even we type on a keyboard is just as unique as our fingerprint, each one of us. So when we can start to gather all of these pieces of information, we can ensure that the candidate, is not the same. Sorry, the candidate, I have to put that in air quotes there, but the candidate is not the same person as the reference who happens to be sat in their own basement on a Gmail account in the name of their reference provider when you go and look them up on LinkedIn, but actually it's the candidate themselves. So, the statistic that I have is that we're looking at around about 7%. So almost 1 in 10 of every single references that goes through our platform is suspicious or unusual in nature, like i.e. a candidate is trying to misrepresent themselves. And I think there's a few different reasons why. The main one, I guess, is because of AI, there's just so much noise out there. If I'm a genuinely great candidate, how do I kind of cut through that noise?
Mhm.
So there's like, I kind of just get a real sense of like an air of frustration that the candidates have got at the moment. And then when they get this far in the process, they're just trying to do whatever they can to actually get hired and get an opportunity to show people what they can do.
Yeah, it's like
But
it's so like I just watched so I have two little girls, and we just watched Sing, which was like this movie about these like little like zoo. They're all like zoo creatures, but they're trying to start a singing group or whatever, and they basically did whatever they could. They hid in a they dressed up as janitors, and they snuck in, and they got in front of the one guy. And I don't blame them for doing that, but you got to get through the noise, and you got to get through to that person that's gonna actually look at you and give you the time of day, and could be the final step. So everybody's like doing that cheat code to get through to the final boss, and I don't blame candidates for doing
yeah, but at the same time, as us being the hiring employer, we've got to
that.
be really careful. I hear horror stories all the time about people hiring people that don't have the right to work in the country, or even they've got 2 or 3 jobs that they're working all at the same time, or even worse, they're like underage and they're overseas as well as that. You've just got to be so careful. So I think as long as we've got audit trails and proof that we've done to the best of our ability, right? And the reality is, unless you want to get all of your human beings in one place at the same time with 2 or 3 different points of photo identification, it's really, really difficult to 100% verify that human is who they say they are, because people are always going to try and bend things. But that's why I think it's really important for us to put the processes in place to remove the chances of that happening as best as we possibly can, and then have an audit trail to prove that we've done it.
So what are some of the like you mentioned a couple of use cases where you've heard horror stories, but what's the reality facing TA people today in terms of like what's the how long does it take to get your reference checks? Is it more, are you seeing it more earlier in the recruiting process, that they're trying to verify who these people are so they don't get too far? Just kind of just work me through the workflow.
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality today facing most people that have to do reference checks, the responsibility to do reference checks. If you were asked to do like a full page report for your boss on a Friday afternoon at 5:30 p.m. or do reference checks, most people would choose the report. Like, people just
Yeah.
really don't like doing references, and I think the reason for that is because the process is so outdated, it hasn't really innovated at all. The reality is references can, oftentimes if we just give the candidate the ability to say, hey, give me 2, 3, or 4 references, I'm obviously going to pick my buddies that I play baseball with, right? Or my buddies that are going to give me the best reference. That therefore has zero validity. It's so important that we instruct the candidate, or we give guidance rather, in terms of like who is acceptable as a reference and who is not. And we can use that through platforms, but the reality is most people are playing phone tag. If they even are successful in getting those conversations, it's usually just like almost like a nodding dog, like the person's just agreeing to whatever they say because they just want to field the call, which is super unhelpful. So what we've seen is, if sure, you still allow the candidate to lead by allowing them to add their reference providers, but with some specific instruction, like, hey, just as an example, right? You need references from the last 5 years, one of whom should be from your most recent employer. And we will not accept at Hotmail, Gmail, or Yahoo email addresses. They must be from at company or at organization.com, or actual telephone numbers of the main line of that organization, for example. That's just one example. But then when you do that, and then you make it quick, simple, easy, and safe for both the candidate and the person who's actually providing the feedback, the reference provider, to do that on whatever device they've got access to, wherever they are in the world, and quite honestly, whichever language they want to speak, that's how you then get this information back in a structured format.
So
So
it used to be,
there's
you could just take like, okay, this person has documentation to be in the country. This person has the documentation that shows that, they're legally here, they can work and whatnot. But nowadays, you want to see more than that. You want to see, okay, is this person a risk beyond just, what the legal documents say? Now, I know you guys can get into
correct.
digital checks. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, with that as well, like I think it's really important to look at, you've got binary checks, right? So if you were to run a check on me personally, just as an example, on any database anywhere in the world, I'm not on it, right? That doesn't mean to, just because I'm not a criminal, that doesn't mean to say I'm going to work well at your organization. What's really credible is where we start to dive deep into the skills of the individual and say, or the observed behavior rather, because observed behavior is something that other human beings can bring to the table, a different perspective. A resume and an interview is like a highlight reel, right? It's
Mhm.
only ever going to talk about the good bits. So when we bring those other perspectives into the equation, we can then get more of a holistic picture of the individual and where their strengths and weaknesses are. But in terms of what you mentioned there, in terms of other checks, we partner with some amazing companies here in North America, both in Canada and the US, because the databases jurisdictions are all very different. But what is universally true is observed human behavior. So if you can ask specific questions that pertain to that particular job, and we've got an R&D team that goes really deep into the data to say, okay, if you want to go and be, I don't know, a physician, for example, these are the qualities that it takes for you to be a successful physician. And we can then build a set of questions using various competency frameworks that go back and probe at those abilities and show that up, which is super powerful because it's all brand new data that doesn't exist anywhere else.
Yeah, I just have to get better at getting my chat GPT all trained and ready for those questions. I'm being funny, yeah. So, we're you've looked at thousands of reference checks over the years, I'm sure. Um, Give me some crazy stories that you've heard because that's what I just dropped the T. Let me know what some crazy stories with the reference checks.
Yes. I actually sleep great, so I don't have to work, but I have read thousands, probably tens of thousands at this point, of reference checks. But I've seen. So in Canada, we have five major banks. Um, you could work who they are pretty quick actually. But there was a scenario that I come across recently. This was a few years ago, actually thinking about it. But the individual was being hired as a senior audit manager, and this senior audit manager said that they had three references. I think one of them was supposed to be in London, England. One was supposed to be in Manhattan, New York, and the other was supposed to be in Toronto. All three references came back from a suburban address just outside of Toronto. They were all on Gmail accounts, etc. I just couldn't believe the audacity of the individual who is literally going to get a job like a senior. Sorry, forgive me. It wasn't the banks. It was another. It was another large
But this is an
institutions.
executive. You know,
Right.
this is
It's an
this is not a
executive
low
that
level
works in.
employee.
Right. But they work in audit, and they had the audacity to misrepresent their own skills and experience to maybe cover up some cracks, or I don't know what the person was trying to hide or why they didn't, actually nominate real human beings that could vouch for them. But that happens every day, right? And had that organization pulled that trigger and hired that individual, straight away that individual has got access both directly and indirectly to tons of financial sensitive and personal information. But not only that, there's also a huge reputational damage that they could do to the organization. So thank God they had a process in place to stop that. But yeah, I mean, I've heard story. You talk about like the dog eating the homework, right? That's what the kids
Yeah,
say when they
yeah.
go into school the next day. Like, oh, I couldn't do my homework. The dog ate it. I've heard so many stories with the reference checking piece, like, oh, I couldn't do my reference is on vacation this week, so I just did it for them myself. Like, okay, well, that's not good, is
That's
it?
so
Like, if you're
that's dishonest.
starting a relationship, if you're starting a relationship with an
Yeah.
organization on a dishonest front, what does that say about your future with that place?
Well,
There's lots.
it's tough to get
Yeah,
this.
tons.
It's tough to get this information because I think a lot of employees, if you're calling them about a former employer, all they can say is that person worked here from this date to that date. There's all these laws. You can't badmouth people. So, if there was someone that crashed out of an organization and there's a huge red flag there, it's hard to find out, you know, uh, all these kind of side things with, like how can you find some of these like hidden stories with people if they're just submitting,
I think
if
it,
they've
what,
been
what
stuck with, this person worked here from X time to X time, and that's all I can tell you.
Yeah, like, I mean, the dates of the employment verification, which is just, by and large, dates of employment, job title, and like that's like just factual information. It doesn't really tell me anything. Like, sure,
Yeah.
James was employed between January and December, but was he like a superstar, or is he just like kind of mediocre, or was he terrible? You don't know. The dates tell you nothing. So what we're doing is we use structured reference check questions. So rather than asking people to fill out open-ended questions, and people can complete as much or as little information as they feel comfortable with, by the way. So if you don't feel comfortable answering a question, you can skip and go to the next one. There's no obligation. You don't have to complete all this information. But one of the things that we've learned over doing this for years and years is that you can ask specific questions and allow the respondents to just put their results on a scale of 1 through 5. Right. So, you can ask us a specific skill, like, for example, have you ever witnessed, um, or what's this individual's ability to deal with stress or feedback or, or conflict amongst their team? Or are there any counterproductive work behaviors that this person demonstrates or exhibits, and how so on a scale of 1 through 5? So there's different ways you can actually still get at that information, and you can probe, right? And you can then have follow-up questions. So based on almost like a logic tree. So if the person says this, then we ask that.
Gotcha.
If they ask this, then we ask that. So you can still get a really good sense as to whether or not this person's going to be a 10 out of 10 or a 1 out of 10.
Well, you have changed my mind. Background checking is not completely boring. There's some interesting things happening in there, and I think it's only going to get even more needed. These type of trusting the candidate is who they say they are, especially with all these tools out there. But thank you for joining me on Totally Talent. He's James Lord. He's at RefApp. Check them out, RefApp.com.
Thanks for tuning in to the Totally Talent podcast by HR.com. We hope you find today's episode insightful and inspiring. Don't forget to explore more episodes and discover valuable resources at hr.com/podcasts, where you can listen to all of our podcasts. Until next time, keep leading with purpose and making a difference in the world of talent.